in Lebanon, or at least for me and for some people like me from my generation, there's an interesting coincidence that happened. That is that as we were transitioning from the age of childhood to the age of adulthood, a lot of political turmoil and societal turmoil and economical, obviously, happened at the same time, as if to mark in a clear red line the two chapters of our lives. I had the urge to film something, to try to encapsulate in a film what we were experiencing, going through.
So it's a lot of breaking illusions that we had. Because also, if you think about it, the things that we lost, they were never really real.
Disillusion for me, as a Lebanese person from my generation, is part of the process to understand the way that things are. I'm realizing that everything that I do now is more meaningful than before.
Pierre, welcome to the Everything You Are podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I feel like this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm excited about it. And also because I remember the first time we spoke about this, we were, I think, randomly at a party. We saw each other and it came up that I was thinking of doing a podcast. It was 1 year ago on the topic of transitioning to adulthood. And you told me that you were also in the process of making 2 movies, one short, one long, on this same topic. So at the time we were in a party, so I think we were both hearing like half of what we were saying. But now I'm happy that we can discuss this further. Also because I find your perspective on the subject very interesting, and the way you analyzed and interpreted your personal experience in parallel with the experience of the country, of the world, of different people around you. So you will tell us more about this. But first, before we get into the topic, can you tell us a bit about you and your work?
So I'm a film director and editor. I did 2 short films, and I'm finishing a feature, so a long format documentary that is personal. It's not very reportage TV kind of documentary. It's more based on personal archives and things I have shot around. And yeah, I'm finishing that film, and we'll see what will happen with it.
Can you tell us a bit what inspired you to make a film about your transition from adolescence to adult life?
It didn't go. It wasn't planned in any way. It was more instinctive. I think I went head on in a project. I jumped head on in a project while we were experiencing all this period in Lebanon from 2019 to 2021. This whole period of change and upheaval and collapse eventually of the country. And I remember as a lot of people were leaving Lebanon, and I remember there was no electricity, no benzene, no fuel. In the midst of the crisis in August 2021, a lot of people were leaving, and I had the urge to film something, to try to encapsulate in a film what we were experiencing, going through. And so I went on and I made a film about a family that is about to emigrate and sell their house and leave the country. And from that project came this documentary that took a long time to understand, a long time to digest. And its principal thematic is, if you want now, a coming of age story of a whole generation from Lebanon transitioning from childhood to adulthood, if you want. But that's like the underlying thematic in the film. But it came about as I was working, because that's what I was experiencing when I was working on this. And it didn't come as a flash idea from the start. It kind of became that as I went along.
Mm. And how did you personally live this experience, live this transition?
So the thing that's it's a subject that obviously everyone will go through at some point in his life. Some people don't pay a lot of attention to this transition that they might be living or that they have lived. And it's difficult for me to talk about this subject in a general view because I don't really know anything about how it applies to other people. What I can say is, if it's helpful for you, to just tell you a little bit how it was for me.
Yes.
The idea is that in Lebanon, or at least for me and for some people like me from my generation and that come from the same kind of place, Beirut, Lebanon, as me, there's an interesting coincidence that happened. That is that as we were transitioning from the age of childhood to the age of adulthood, a lot of political turmoil and societal turmoil and economical, obviously, happened at the same time, as if to mark in a clear red line the two chapters of our lives. And that's something that might not happen to every generation and not everywhere in the world, but there's something also funny about it because it coincides with the COVID as well. So maybe it has a wider reach than just Lebanon. But in Lebanon, because of the political revolution and economic crisis, it was exacerbated and it was way more present and defined. So basically, what's interesting, and I was born in 1997 and you were born in 1998, I think. And we were born in a country that had just gone through a civil war and that was in the midst of a reconstruction and that was also undergoing societal decisions, if you want, to kind of forget about the war, keep it quiet, as if nothing happened, clean off every little trace of that war and of everything that it meant and replace it with just maybe silence or oblivion and so I'm not going to go too deep into that subject because everyone has different ideas of what it meant, but we kind of arrived into the world just after a big cleanup had happened. And the moment we transition to adulthood coincide with the moment this cleanup kind of explodes in the form of the Beirut explosion or whatever symbolic time you want to attribute it. But what was fascinating for me was these coincidences and also the fact that we were, as a generation, catapulted into adulthood. It was not a smooth transition. It was not as other generations and other people around the world live that time frame. We were very much pushed from one side to the other. And some people, obviously, because of their financial situation, had it smoother than others. But I feel like as a cohort, it's still the same movement that we've all experienced. It's the same slap of reality. It's the same that symbolizes this transition into adulthood. You don't become an adult until you get that slap in your face. Or some people talk as well archetypally about the death of the father or these kind of ideas that say that you only become an adult once. Not that it doesn't mean that your father needs to die, but the symbolic of the father dies when you realize that your parents are only humans and they're not heroic in any way and they cannot really save you from the problems of life and they have their own huge amount of problems to surmount and they have their limitations. And I think as well the economic crisis pushed a lot of people from the generation of our parents to lose it, because imagine building everything and losing everything again, building everything and losing everything again. And that's the story, the cyclical story of this country. When they lost everything, a lot of them got lost within themselves. They could not assume the role of someone that had that knew what was going on, that knew what we should do, that knew how to lead a society or a family into this new problem that was this economic crisis. And it kind of, for some of us or for many of us, made us understood that we were the adults now. We were still fresh to attack the problems of the world and the problems of our country and the problems of our lives, and it was us who should find the solutions. And our parents are maybe tired and are maybe pushed, like we were pushed into adulthood. Some of them were pushed into the senior kind of age or retirement, because some of them maybe lost jobs, and it's difficult at that age to find new jobs. And I feel like there's many generations who were pushed from just one category of life to another, one part of growth to another. And so I find that idea very interesting and very applicable to our country and our situation. And
yeah, I find it super interesting, the parallel that you draw between our transition to adult life with the situation in Lebanon. I never thought about it before you explained it to me. And I feel like, yeah, as you said, it exacerbated a lot what we were feeling. So this feeling of loss of a part of your life, which is also coincides with loss of a country in the way you know it. And also, I think with, like you said, COVID and everything, it's loss of the idea maybe that the world is stable, or that realization of the fragility also of the world and the systems in which we live in, how from one day to another, the way we live can change, and we suddenly, like, everything stops and everyone has to stay home. So it's a lot of maybe breaking illusions that we had, because also if you think about it, the things that we lost, they were never really real. Life was never innocent and naive like we thought, and the country was never booming and good like we thought, and the world was never stable. So it's a bit like, okay, realizing how life is, but everything at the same time. When you think about it, it's crazy what we lived.
Exactly. Yeah. What I loved exactly is the timing of all of these things together. And what it says to me as an individual living life from a subjective point of view. So obviously I can think objectively about the world and stuff, but how funny is it that it all coincides in my subjectivity, you know? And like you said, the world was never a naive world where everything was fine and where it was all illusions, but a lot of people believed in those illusions, and a lot of people who have lived long enough to know better believed in those illusions. And I'm not just talking about Lebanon, but even the West, you know, this whole era where capitalism and science and modernity were working hand in hand to bring the human race to the next level, and we were all following the Western nations to that would save us and bring democracy and all that bullshit, you know. They were illusions. Obviously it was propaganda, and obviously not everyone believed in that, but there was enough signs not to feel so alarmed by it, not to feel like it's the deterioration could show up that quick. And then everything that unfolded and that dismantled this reasoning has this kind of very heightened cinematic form to it. You want to invent a president of the United States that would show or be the symbol of the end of that empire. Is there anyone better than Donald Trump to symbolize that? Or you want to kill the super interconnected world that we were living in and the legend that it was selling to the world. COVID is such a, you know, it's almost designed as a story, you know, and I don't believe in science and I don't believe in God or I don't believe in any kind of, but I find it amusing how strong the symbols are. Like you want to show a country's death, its capital explodes everywhere. It's crazy the strength of all these symbols that we went through. And if you go through the whole chronology of how we lived through these events, they're very telling, especially if you see it from the subjectivity of people from our generation. The Thawra, when I think about the revolution, it's something beautiful that happened at the same time. Obviously, it was unfinished. Obviously, we could have pushed it more. Obviously, it's a grayer zone that what other people can say, but at the same time, it's something very important that we lived through. It's something very important that this country has tried to do, obviously has failed at doing, but it's still not nothing, you know, that all these people went down to the streets, went to protest, tried at least to voice something. But what I remember was the sheer naivety of the people participating in the Thawra, and me the first. We really believed for some time that we could actually achieve that. And when you think about how far we are now of actually changing anything or having any control of our lives and the directions of the country, etc. It shows how naive as a generation we were about the world, and how much we thought that we as a cohort of young people were grabbing back our country and our lives for ourselves. And then obviously the sahsuh, the slap, and everything that followed. And so from my perspective, what amused me as well is that, not amused me, but in that kind of relationship to the symbols and what they can mean. A month before the revolution, my grandfather passed away. And he was the second of my grandfather to pass away. There was another one that passed away 1 year earlier, but this time it had a bigger impact on me because it was the first time that a whole generation of my family had disappeared. And I really felt when I was with him and assisting to his death. And he lived a long life and he was sick, so there's nothing of that. It's not sad in any personal way. It's more, I really felt like with him, a whole world was dying. The world in which I was born into, which was his world, and the old people's world that I was born into, was vanishing with him. And a new world was starting to emerge where he would no longer exist, or his generation will no longer exist. And I remember feeling suddenly a kind of anxiety. It was 1 month before October 2019, so 1 month before the Thawra, basically. And I remember having a whole month after his death of being very, very extremely anxious. And I don't know why. I'm not normally a guy that does panic attacks and those kind of stuff, but it was unexplainable. I kind of felt like there was nothing solid on which everything was built. It was like an eye-opening moment where I was realizing for the first time that anything could happen at any given time. That as well, it was coinciding with health stuff, because of personal health stuff, but mainly the idea that anyone can have a heart attack at any moment, and there's no proof that you can get that it won't happen. And we lived in a world where we thought that there was an answer to everything, that science and medicines and doctors and stuff had an answer to everything, that everything was very solid, and if that doesn't work out, there's another plan, and if the other plan doesn't work out, there's another plan. And maybe we were sold that idea from maybe it's the environment where I was born, but I feel like as a lot of people throughout the world of our generation, we're sold that idea that there is a lot of everything is in control, and these institutions that rule over us have control over these danger potentials.
And I feel like also growing up, you think that things like adults have things under control, that companies know what they're doing, governments know what they're doing. You feel like you don't have any reason to question that, because except if you live under like very bad conditions, but you think like, yeah, the world is figured out. But actually you realize that not at all, like no one knows what they're doing. I feel like this also is, like you said, a realization that is disturbing because you feel you cannot really rely on anyone. No one has all the answers. We are all kind of lost, and no one really knows what they're doing.
Exactly, and especially now it's like we accepted that the world is officially admitting that nobody has any idea what the fuck is going on, what the fuck we have to do. But in the Obama period, it was a whole other posture. It was the world was trying to send signals that it knew exactly where things are going, that if a meteorite comes to the Earth or a comet, then NASA would find a way to miraculously save us, and we were sure about that. And it all disappeared with the COVID, obviously.
And also climate change, I think.
Obviously, but the COVID was like a sign. If we cannot handle COVID, then how the fuck are we gonna handle climate change and all the AI and all the other problems that technology and the rest is going to make us face in the next a few years and decades. So yeah, now we all admit that we don't know what's happening, but I feel like it wasn't so much the case 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so yeah, so I had this period where I would do panic attacks every single day for a month. And I remember writing everywhere the sentence, I feel like everything is way more fragile than I thought it was. I feel like my whole life, my whole world is way more vulnerable than I think it is. And repeating on and on and on on this idea, and then suddenly someone calls me and tells me there's a revolution in Lebanon. And I take a plane. I was not in Lebanon for that specific month, and I take a plane and I arrive the second day of the revolution in Beirut, and then this whole anxiety just disappears. I had panic attacks every day and then gone. And I'm in the Thawra, and I'm filming the Thawra every day, and I'm there 10 hours per day for how, I don't know, it lasted 4 or 5 months. And it's crazy. For me, from my subjective point of view, it's almost like a kind of presentiment that something was about to happen that would prove this point out, you know. And then we had the Thawra, and then the COVID happened. Also something interesting from my subjectivity, because yeah, my whole point is how I can tell my own story and see how it relates to the thematic that you want to talk about. I had to do a heart surgery because I was born with a heart problem, a heart condition. And it's very associated with my birth because I was born with this defect. And they had always told me, when you're going to be an adult and your body is going to stop to grow, we're going to have to do another surgery to fully repair your heart. And so in terms of science, that means when you're 21, 22, not 18. So I get to that age, and they tell me, finally, we can receive you and we can do the operation that you need, the open heart surgery. And they put a date, which is end of February 2020. I go, I do the surgery, and the day I wake up from the surgery was the first day a case of COVID entered Lebanon. And for me, it was as if I slept in a world I go do that surgery. I come back out through the anesthesia and stuff. And I wake up into this other dystopian world. And yeah. And ever since, everything has been different. Everything has been completely different. So all these little symbols and almost plot points amuse me and make me feel like I can tell that part of my life as a story almost. And there's something to take out of that because it's almost written. Now that we're talking about it, it feels a little bit obvious because time has passed and we kind of have all digested it a little bit. But it was very interesting as it was going on to see that this thing was happening.
And I feel like, as you said, I think we know what happened and what we went through, but I don't think we realize or we think often about really the proportion that it had or the how big it was, what we went through. And when you say it now like this, you realize that actually, yes, there was a lot of change happening at the same time, a lot of endings, a lot of things. So it's super interesting. And part of going past this is first having maybe a very harsh wake-up call that actually this is not the reality and this is how things are, to after do something about it and change it.
Yeah, disillusion for me, as a Lebanese person from my generation, is part of the process to understand the way that things are, the way that this country is, how it works, how the society I come from works, what it did, what it suffered, what it did to others. It's important to go through disillusion so that you can deconstruct everything that was that you were fed or that you constructed over time, so that you can see stuff with clearer eyes and clearer conscience. And now you can start being the real person that you want to be, because we grow up thinking that we're this type of person, we have this personality, we like this, we like that, and we really feel like we are free to be that person that we are. We really want to take all the praise, if you want, for the person that we are. But we're only the product, at least until you're 25, if not throughout your whole life, you're only the product of the luck you had and where you were born. You're born in that family with that amount of money, with that amount of love or not love, with that amount of safety or not security, and all these attributes, and you're a consequence of all these parameters. You have nothing to do with the person. You have no pride in the person that you are. You're just that because of the circumstances surrounding your birth. And then at some point, if you don't construct enough things, and you deconstruct all these stuff that made who you were as you were growing up, then maybe you can have a chance at defining the person you want to become. And having the freedom to become it yourself, not just because you're born in that family or with that parent or with that parent or with.
How did you, or at which moment did you realize this, what you're saying now?
Obviously, a lot of personal stuff that as well in the span of the last 3-4 years coincided with everything that we talked about. Then I did this film, which was very transformative for me because I had to, basically what the film is feeding off is 2 sources of image. 120 hours that my father shot in the end of the 90s, beginning of the early 2000s, so surrounding my birth. 120 hours of footage, and mostly home movies, and sometime you get to see the society and the little society around him. And the other 200 hours was everything I shot in the revolution, the explosion, and the economic crisis. And I'm trying to make these 2 sources of footage dialogue, because like I said, it's 2 brackets of a childhood. And you kind of can get a full picture of what this childhood meant and how this generation is propelled outside of it after all these events. And so while watching 120 hours of your parents and your family and your brother and yourself at all the ages, and watching it, selecting 50 hours, watching the 50 hours, selecting 25 hours. So it's almost like a free therapy session that you get, that kind of made me on a personal level see the little family myths that get broken. But in the same way that you have family myths, you have societal myths, you have national myths, you have international. So it's about breaking these little myths with which you grow up. You know, and everyone has those, I think. It could be negative, it could be positive. It could be, I have always felt that I was the favorite of my mother or the least favorite of my mother. And then you see that, no, maybe not. Maybe it was in your head. I have always felt that it was these people's fault that we had the war, not our fault. But then it's kind of breaking these myths one after another. Trying to fit everything under one same. Obviously, it's not very precise, but
but
I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, and I feel like we're always going to have myth and illusions. It's part of it. But the moment you see them, you can decide if you like this illusion or this myth and you want to continue living in it, or you don't like it and you want to create a new one and start living in this one. But the important is to see it and to realize that actually it's just an illusion and it can change. Maybe now it's working, maybe at some time it's not going to work. But for you, what was, and maybe we can speak about one specific thing, it doesn't have to be general, but what was the process? So you had disillusionment, then you had deconstruction in what you were feeling, like anger, sadness.
I decided to face all of that.
Okay.
Some people, maybe because my work is more oriented towards human beings and artistic stuff and thinking about human beings, I had no right to really create, how do you say, defense mechanism to kind of protect myself from what was happening, because that's my field of work. Is this kind of behavior. So it's a choice it's a choice, and it's a privilege to have the time to face all these questions and everything. But I feel like once you start on that road, you cannot go back. You cannot go back in return to in the road of disillusionment and deconstruction, because once you see one thing, then why not see that lie? And if you saw that lie, then that lie is so apparent and evident there, and it starts to affect everything, even the food that you eat. If you realize the lies about your country and the lies about your society and the lies that you told to yourself to advance, how can you believe in the lies of a Kit Kat bar? You know what I mean? Or the lies of a Fantasia, or all these products that they're selling, which contains a lot of very, very, very toxic stuff, poisonous stuff that we eat all day and that we feed ourselves with every single day. So you kind of start to see how a lot of stuff is lying to you. Now, obviously, you still live in that world and you don't want to be a hermit that doesn't want to participate in society. So you choose your battles. You can be flexible. You can eat maybe not 5 Kit Kat bars, but one. You know what I mean? You arrange with yourself what lie you can live with and what lie you cannot live with. But it's a road that kind of touches to everything at the end of the day, and that's something I like. But it has to come from the choice of choosing to face it. It's not one singular event or one singular realization, or it's all of them at the same time.
And did you go, because like you said, when you start seeing all of these lies, all of these illusions, it can go very far. You think the lies of your personal life, your country, the world. So did you feel at some point maybe angry with other people that are not seeing this light, or did you feel disconnected with the world and other people?
Maybe in the beginning, yeah, obviously, and it's a stupid phase that you have to go through, I think, because you
Yeah.
feel like grumpy and not smart at all to be angry. It feels like a crazy person. I have seen all the lies and everything.
Yeah.
None of you are seeing it. But basically, look, when I left Lebanon in 2021 after shooting my film, and I went to Paris for 2 years. And I hated it there. I hated it there for so many reasons that also have to do with myself and where I was at that point in my life, and the fact that I couldn't really work, and really I didn't have like permits to work and stuff like that. So I didn't really have the official stay in Paris where you can start a new life. But I felt that. I felt like the society surrounding me in Paris didn't vibe on the same frequency of honesty that I needed at that time. And it's only when I came back to Lebanon that I felt that in other people. And it didn't have to go through conversations, it didn't have to go through nagging and complaining and all of that. It could go through just an eye contact, just a gaze in someone's eyes, and you know that they are on a frequency of a certain of understanding of what has happened and why they chose to stay, why they're here, and how they want to live their lives, the way they want to live their lives. And I don't think they're in the same kind of bubble as elsewhere.
What were you like feeling?
Obviously, in the beginning, you're not relaxed.
Yes.
You're not doing it in a relaxed way. You're doing it with a lot of mixed emotions that you don't know how to articulate yet. So yeah, it was pretty. It was a ride. It was not. It was a ride, but to get to a point, you have some time to go through. To get to a certain understanding of something, it takes sometimes a year of plunging into some kind of darkness, And yeah, it took maybe 2, 3 years, 4 years, but it's not even 4 years. It's a story of your life. It's all one story of how you change your way of seeing your life, and hopefully it will continue to change. And I would say that what I'm saying now is not the way it is, and
Yes.
But I have learned to be more relaxed while thinking about those stuff. Yes. I feel way more at peace with the way I want to live my life now than I did 2-3 years ago. Because maybe I have unlocked the deconstruction process in a more powerful way these last few years. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I relate with what you say, that sometimes you go to an extreme and then you balance again and you get to a middle ground where it's more harmonized. But yeah, I relate. I also went to a phase of extreme questioning everything, and like we said before, everyone is wrong, and I know I see that everything is wrong, but you don't. So yeah, it's not a very nice phase to be in. And then you readjust, and it becomes more I think also it's not something that you do and then you're done with. It's more like a way of seeing life, like you said, of taking more like perspective on things, of questioning more.
I think it all comes back to, as ideally, what is the life that you as a human being are supposed to be living? And how different is your life from that specific life? And my theory is that our bodies are designed to live a specific type of life, which is the life of a hunter-gatherer that lives in a small community, that is nomadic, that eats in a specific way, that acts in a specific way. And only in that particular environment, obviously it's dangerous. Obviously you can die young from a fucking little cut, you know. But this is how you can live your life without asking yourself a lot of questions, because it all feels natural to you. And we all live on the planet a life that has nothing to do with what our bodies are designed to be doing on an everyday basis. You're not supposed to sit on a chair. You're supposed to sit on the ground or on a rock, or, you know, you're not supposed to eat all the stuff that we're eating, to rest as much as we're resting, to many other stuff. And so obviously it will bring all these questionings, but also all these negative feelings that we're all feeling across the world. There's something so fascinating about the studies, the comparisons between the lifestyles of farmers and lifestyles of hunter-gatherers. There's a paper I read that argues that the first proven case that a war happened, a real war happened, is after the invention of agriculture. So imagine that war didn't exist before agriculture. It means that because before there was no possession. Humans traveled on the globe like a pack of wolves do. They're part of the nature and they come and they go. They were a predatory species that predates on whatever is there and then they go away. When they switched to become a productive-based species, which is going to force the earth to give them the food they want, make it produce stuff. And then the idea of property started to appear, because I'm here and I want to stay here and that belongs to me. So when someone else wants it, I'm going to fight. And so war appears between humans. And what a more symbolic thing as war. It's like a cancer entering society, you know? And our whole lifestyle changed from that moment. Obviously, we became a lot more, many of us. There was an explosion in terms of numbers of Homo sapiens. But each Homo sapiens lived a far worse life than his ancestor. And that happened over millennia, like the transformation into agriculture. But it's interesting because agriculture is a technology, the same way as an iPhone is a technology. Is sometimes technology help you grow your numbers, but the individual person is not living a better life. And I think that's where the whole species took the wrong turn. I really believe that. I don't know. I know it's a long tangent.
No. Interesting. So it's like maybe when we started staying in the same place and possessing things, that's when the first or basis illusion started, that you can actually have things that are fixed and you can actually possess things. Whereas before it was going with the natural flow of life, whereas that everything is constantly changing and we're always evolving. And the moment we started these illusions and like money and things that we invented, that's when like conflict started, like I said. And I think it's also related to the other subject that we talked about, how it's important to also look at the past and see what's good about it, what's bad about it, like in older generations, like in very like ancient times, like in Lebanon, how we have the tendency of not remembering, of just forgetting and moving on and acting like nothing happened. But how the past, okay, we're not going to go back to hunter and gatherer time, but how we can learn things from it and have things that are the things that are good, maybe integrate more of it, and the things that are bad, not bring them back. But okay, to go back to the original, the flow of the conversation. So, okay, you went through this phase of disillusionment, of endings, and of loss across different dimensions. And so how then, because of course every ending is also the beginning of something new, like how did you create this new phase of your life, or how do you see it?
It's a little bit like you said with the hunter-gatherer stuff. You said you can look at how they live, you can integrate. Obviously, we're not going to become hunter-gatherer, but you can try to integrate some parts of it that still make sense.
Yes.
I feel like that's what I'm doing in general with my new phase. Is I'm trying the way I'm trying to organize my life now is having a set of values that I feel are important to me. And obviously I fixed those values as I went through this whole experience. مثلا انه career and ambition was very much a top value to me before. I have dumped that value of my value system, if you want. Freedom is very important to me, and feeling like I'm living a meaningful life, a life that to me makes me feel like I'm going through a lot of meaningful experiences and meaningful exchanges with people. And another value is good and bad, and bad and good are difficult to explain and to feel, and it doesn't mean anything. But I feel like in a world like this one, where there's a lot of darkness and there's a lot of bad stuff happening, it's important to believe that good still exists and that bad doesn't always win. Even though it feels naive, even though it comes from poetical idea, and it's like, but I hope I don't know, I'm still attached to the idea that at the end of the day you have to try to do good. You're not good, nobody's good. You can be the worst person to someone and the best person to someone else, but try as much as you can to be good, to feel good, to position yourself in the good, and to understand the other person, where the other people are coming from. All the time, because if you don't understand where the other people are coming from, you're never going to be able to negotiate with them if you have a problem. And that's my political mentality when I'm seeing any political problems around the world. I feel like both in terms of for humanity's sake, but even for your own sake, you better work with the other, and you go through life in a way more interesting way, because you see that everyone has something interesting in the way they see the world, and they see their own positions in the world and your interactions with them. And so I'm trying to apply that in general in my life. I'm trying as well to consider everything as work. Before, work was work and the rest was if I have the time, I can see my friends. If I have the time, I can be good to my parents, or be good to that person, or help out that person. It was plus. Now I try to see everything in my life as work. Taking care of my body and doing exercise is as much work as bringing money. Is as much work as seeing my friends and having good relationship with people. As much work as doing something I'm passionate about. If I like to, whatever, I don't like to play guitar. If you like to play guitar really much, you have to consider everything in your life that has meaning to you as work. So you're kind of juggling 20 balls at the same time, and it's hard to keep the machine running, but at least you feel complete on all sides.
And also it makes sense because everything in your life feeds into the work that you do, because it's produced by you. So everything will it will go into your work. But at the same time, if you're a more social person, maybe it's a good way to get a project at some point, to get a job, or get a new contact for work. If you have more money, maybe you can travel and have some fun. If you travel, maybe you're going to meet someone and be friends. So it's all connected. And mainly relationships. People kind of a lot, if they need to cut somewhere, they cut in relationships. And with their families, with people that mean stuff to them. Can be family members or not. Not only friends, there are other types of relationships you can have. But these are very important, because
it's very beautiful when you can have an impact on someone else's life. It's even more important than to have an impact on your work or on a new check that you received, you know? So that's the idea.
And do you feel you made peace with the fact that nothing is constant or stable and that everything is fragile and changes?
Yes. Yeah, I think the whole process of going through all of that is to get to a point where you accept that and you're like, okay, challenge, I accept it. That's life. Yeah, have to, you know. But for some time I was very sad to feel like the kid in me is dying slowly and I'm entering a new age. And now I'm I'm realizing that everything that I do now is more meaningful than before because you kind of know yourself better. And I guess that when you enter your 30s and your 40s and 50s, it can only get better because every experience you're going to live it in such a meaningful, profound way on a sphere, on a frequency that is way deeper than a teenager still confused, still in illusions and stuff like that. I like what's in store in adulthood.